Okay. So good morning, Ms. Beth.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I had the opportunity to observe your second period, and today what we're going to do is we're going to go over some student work, as well as how you felt the lesson went, and we're going to relate it back to our competency document to see just to make sure that I'm supporting you and making lessons as purposeful as possible for students. So could you remind me what the purpose of the lesson was?
Yeah, the purpose was for the students to practice using social and emotional vocabulary to identify their emotions, and then once identifying the emotions, coming up with an alternative response. So like, this happened, and then this is how I reacted, and then it's like, okay, so what emotions was the person feeling at that moment? And getting them to say more than just mad. And then having them to kind of do a redo of like, okay, well, this is how I could have handled it better. Kind of reflecting on that.
Excellent. So, So that was the intent. And then, what changes did you make along the way, or what noticings did you have along the way?
I think it went really well, and them actually like being able to like think of moments. Some of them, like, I actually did have it. Some of them were like, "No, I never get mad." I'm like, "Really?" I had this student was like, "I'm very positive, Miss A." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, I understand, but I was like, "Is there a point where you get mad with your parents or something?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." It's like, "Yep, there it is." So it was funny, but no, it was. I think it went really well and actually better than I expected. However, some changes that I think would have been helpful to do, and that would be better for next time, is that instead of doing this whole lesson as a whole in one day, like taking it apart and doing it over, like, say, a whole week, where like at the end of the week they film, because I think this reading each other's stories, discussing them, and like identifying the things, I think this lesson could have been one of the components, and it could have been broken up into like more days, because since I first had them write on a Google document, like share a Google document and write down their stories. We could even focus on like one day unpacking that story, but like working on grammar. So, okay, this is what you have as a written product. Let's fix the mistakes and everything. So having one day to like write, and then edit, another day to share with your group, and identify, like really work and like focus on one story and give it a substantial amount of time, and then another story. So like doing like that, and then another day to write alternative responses to it. Or whether it is one day that we focus on one story and we write alternative response to that story. So I think it would have been way better to do it over like a course of a whole week. I just didn't know the students would get that much into it. I mean, I was a bit hesitant, because I was like, I don't know if they're going to really get too much into it. I want to be very open about their emotions or like personal life kind of thing. But it actually ended up going really well, and I found out how many kids have punched teachers. And and I was like, okay, this is why we're doing this. So that before you get so angry with me that you want to punch me, that you're able to identify your emotion and tell me, Miss A, I need a timeout. It's kids that you would never imagine that they had, and it's interesting, like that would have done that. It's interesting hearing their stories. And at first I was like, are they just like doing this because they know it gets a reaction? But then other kids be like, oh yeah, that's in 6th grade. I remember you were on the field and you broke that teacher's leg. Like,
okay,
stories like that where I'm like, wow.
So then, before we look at the student work, one question I wanted to have, like, kind of out there as we look at it as a frame, is how the standard that you use, because I know it's related to, we use the Common Core standard as well as the actual ones for the World Language Standards, to see how the standard and the teaching point, I guess, how the task was aligned to that standard or teaching point. So could you remind me what the actual standard was?
I have to look at them again, but it was the first one is like the interpersonal and intrapersonal, I think. It's because it's a communication standard, and there's 3 of them that fall under. There's 3 sub-standards that you can use, and I mostly use the interpersonal and intrapersonal standard, which requires them. I need to look it up again.
No. So but I want you to cite standards now.
But it requires the students to analyze and reflect. So they get some individual time to reflect on something, and I think the standard even says like analyze to express feelings and emotions in something in the target language. So definitely met the standard in that, because they had time to work individually and reflect on that, because they had like 20 minutes to write about their experience, and then they had a time to collaborate with each other and share it. So that definitely met the standard. And then I used the Common Core standard that talks about writing for an appropriate task and audience. So that was met through in various ways, but primarily through the Google document, because they had to write in a paragraph form and tell the story. So that's how it was met. And then they had to write in here for the appropriate task, and each person had a role, and they had to, answer the questions and write appropriately to that task.
Have you had a chance to review your fourth period yet?
No.
We'll do it together.
Yeah, I mean, they're still working on it. We still have to do more.
Oh, no, that's okay, because like you mentioned, it's ongoing, and that's, part of our work. Like, how can we make this an easier process for you and for the students?
Yeah. No, I think they were doing really well. What we had here was each student had a role and what they had to do, so that each student was accountable. Because I was like, I could give one student, like, each student a copy, but then that's a lot of kind of more busy work than if they're being engaged and have a task. Like, hey, right now I'm the timekeeper, right now I'm this.
So then it also goes into building that social emotional, whether or not they know that that's part of being collaborative. You might be upset that someone is doing something in your group work. So then, so for this question, so you asked, why did you react this way? Okay.
Yeah, and then I provided sentence starters, because sometimes they will be like, they can speak the language for the most part, even though they still, they'll still try to speak English in class, so we're working on, let's transition to full-on Spanish. But they'll be like, I can't write, I don't know how to write, or I don't know how to do it, so I provided sentence starters so that they'd be able to know how to get started or answer the question.
So when they were doing this, I mean, what are some things that you observed? Like, did students say the sentence before they wrote it down, or was their process more internal?
No, they they struggled a bit with this section of having to answer, because then it required them to kind of self-analyze what happened, and kind of, they don't like sometimes to dig in and be like, no, I was wrong or something like that. So that was an interesting walk around and hear their discussions. But no, the way I saw it play out was that after the person shared their story, so while the person was sharing their story, one person was in charge of identifying like the different emotions they were feeling, like, I don't know how they could do like a write out. It was however they wanted to write it. So they could do it like this, or they could just list them like feliz, and they had their vocabulary list with them that they could point out, like feliz, enojada, frustrada, cansada. So they could just do that, and that's while they were reading the story, and afterwards they checked in with the group, like, okay, did I get them all, or was this enough or something? And then after that, then the investigator, the person would ask, a different student would ask them these questions, and like the student would typically like answer right away, and sometimes it would take some time, and sometimes I would like walk by and hear the student give an answer, just because like an answer that was not really digging in deeper, or it was just kind of like, well, just because I felt mad.
And so then how did you?
Oh, for that, I was like, hey, give me more. I was like, give me more. There's got to be something deeper there. Like, it's just not just you being mad or because you don't like the person. What is it doing that you don't like? And that's when I take a chance to be like, okay, guys, like, everybody take a pause. Like, if your classmates are giving you answers that you know are not really answering the question or letting you know what's behind the problem, I was like, then you have to push deeper and come up with other questions to like ask them.
And then based on your observations, I would want to know, how did you feel that students took to the task?
They really enjoyed it, and which made me realize and think about maybe having them have journals where they kind of journal, and getting them into the practice of journaling and their emotions and feelings and how they're doing, because they definitely liked writing their stories, and a lot of them were like, oh, I have a lot to say. And I was like, well, if you finish one, jump in and write another one, And it was cool seeing them all focus and actually typing away and writing. I mean, I can show you some of the documents. Their paragraphs are pretty long. I can show them to you. Absolutely. And I was like, wow, they can write. And longer paragraphs, because I thought they were just going to give me like something like this, but it ended up being a substantial paragraph. So they did like it, and I think because they knew they were going to make a video at the end, they would get to act it and use their phones to video each other and collaborate and everything. I think they had that at the end too, that they were like, oh, we're going to get to do this with this.
Oh, make it come alive. So then I had a question for you in terms of the execution, so the success criteria, I do notice that you did do a great job of like outlining their roles to like build responsibility. But then I was wondering, and again, I know that this happened to me a lot as a teacher. Like some students like took to it, and like while other students did one or two. Why do you think that was?
Well, we had a lot of students not here yesterday, so some of them they didn't have enough people to do 4 roles, so they would do 2 roles. So that was one of the things, is that I had like 11 students in one class, and the groups were supposed to be of 4. So we had to change things up or have people work in just pairs. So that's one reason.
Definitely. So for those students who didn't get the opportunity to do this, now that all students are back after the day of protest, what are your next steps, I guess, with this assignment, so that they can all benefit from it?
Today I'd like to do it again, but for the students who've already done theirs, to pick another story. Since most of them had a lot of stories, I was like, I'm thinking of having them do, okay, like if you did this yesterday, then you do another story. And since they already know the process, I think it's going to go smoother, because they know what's expected of them and how to do it. So I'm having them come up with other stories. And they'll be, like, then they'll have, because most of them, the groups were incomplete, so they'll have the whole group dynamic going, like, actually 4 people per.
Yeah, and that's a good extension for them as well. They can be the leaders in the classroom.
Yes.
So then, now that we've gone over, I know I had a chance to look a bit at the work. Before we jump into this, what are some noticings you just have initially of like things that you appreciate in the student work, and then things that you would want to nudge students more with, having kind of looked at this already?
I think this is a good starting point, and I'd like to keep this activity going for, like, do it a few times during the month, just because it's a good reflection that they can start practicing. It's a good reflective practice. I think in the future, I think they did a good job at like learning new academic language, like cronometrador. They didn't know what that was, and actually trying to be that role. I had students who I didn't tell them to like get a Google timer. I didn't tell them that, but they were like, okay, so if I'm at my timekeeper, and they went on their computers and found a timer, like a bomb that explodes when the 3 minutes hit or something, and they set their own time. So one kid was like, hey, we can do 5 minutes per person. I was like, sure. Another kid was like, no, 3 minutes, because we have 20 minutes to do this. So it was neat seeing them kind of like fill the roles and set their own parameters of how they were going to do it. I would have loved if they could come up with their own questions. I think that's something we have to build towards. It's like inquiry, what kind of questions do I ask? Follow-up questions, those kind of things. So I'd love to build into that and create that space where they're writing the questions.
Definitely, and I think, and I'm sure you're aware of this because you're so knowledgeable. The depth of knowledge, I think they have it in Spanish as well.
So,
yeah. So then we can work on like building that into your classroom, because I think if they have the stems, that then they will be able to, kind of like you already did here with the sentence stems. So do you already have access to those, Miss? The depth of knowledge, the Spanish ones?
No.
I'll get you those.
No, I don't have access to those.
Yeah, no, I'll get you those. It's crazy how so many resources, like, you have to translate or, like, find them online.
No.
So, going back to the competency document, it's, I know this is our first kind of exercise with it.
Yeah, I'm okay with whatever, because that just gives you room to grow.
Yeah. No, and this is a good room to grow for me. Like, when I watch these videos, I'm like, okay. I need to work on that. So when we look at the purpose strand, the first standard would be, how are they connected? So if you could take a moment to look at it, where do you feel that you are, based on this lesson and just based on your teaching, do you feel that you're in this area where the lesson wasn't based on standards, or approaching where it was based on standards and the intention was aligned? Whereas here, if you're meeting proficiency, it's aligned, the intention's also aligned to the standard, and that you're frequently connecting that to a broader skill. And when we look at exceeds proficiency, it's a broader purpose. It's very close. Meets and exceeds is pretty close. Where do you feel you are on the spectrum?
I think I'm definitely above below proficiency.
I would agree.
Well, I mean, if I look at the rubric and criteria, the lesson was definitely based on standards, two types of standards, and You made intention, like the intention that was aligned to the learning objective, and then the success criteria was feasible, and the students were able to meet it. At the end, like we did at the end of class, we did go over success criteria. It's like, did we meet our criteria? Let's look at it. And they did identify the 2 emotions, so specific, and they were able to formulate positive and alternative responses for like the ones that they got to. So I don't know, somewhere. I think I met the proficiency. Okay. I think it's a transfer. I think the transferable skill, what they're doing, social emotional vocabulary, and it's. I mean, I think it goes into a broader purpose because it's something that it's not like a school thing you learn. It's something that they can use outside of school, and we're building. And I think we're gonna have to start like a wall where we're writing down those strategies because they're building strategies of like take a breath, count to 3, you know, like, so they're becoming aware of those things that I know they can use outside of school.
You're helping them expand their toolkit. So then I know that you did a bit of this during the lesson, which is connecting into future and previous lessons. Do you feel that if we look at the meets proficiency that it was clearly linked to previous lessons, or if you could use some a little bit more work where it was linked, but students didn't see like the logical progression of it? I think that would be the biggest difference. Yeah. And below proficiency, which I wouldn't say that you're there for this at all. Where do you feel that you lie on the spectrum?
It was definitely very linked to the previous lesson because we, the previous lesson we introduced vocabulary. So that sheet of vocabulary, we introduced it, we practiced it, and our do nows, everything was about like, well, how are you feeling? Choose an emotion from there to do that. And then yesterday was, okay, let's practice these in action. Let's practice identifying them, not just like in our present lives, but like in the past. So definitely.
And then looking at the strand, were the teaching points aligned to student learning needs? So a lot of this is looking at their background life, their experience, culture, and languages.
Yeah, it's funny. I just had to do a context assignment about this. So
you're familiar.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and all of this research is linked because it's the 5 dimensions, and there are only so many authors.
Yeah, I think definitely because the reason I'm doing this for my research is because from last semester, I was able to see how the students couldn't voice or be self-advocate what they voice their emotions, what their feelings, and instead they would just like act out. And they need those skills. They need that vocabulary to be able to pinpoint what they're feeling. And then I had the students write me letters and share about themselves. And I didn't ask them to tell me like traumas or anything like that. But a lot of our students, a lot of them, like have been abandoned by their parents, have been in foster care, have experienced all those sorts of traumas, if we could say, where it's like, well, have you received counseling? I don't know if they received counseling. Have they known how to process, even though for some of them it's been years? Like, clearly some of them are still working through it because they wrote about it in their letter and in their skit. So it's definitely the skill they need to just how to reflect and talk about those.
I would, and I would say to push you to exceed, that's where, and again, it's the beginning of the year, so getting to know their academic backgrounds a little bit more and building up the sentence stems and the vocabulary, that would be like the only suggestion I would have. But again, that's going to be ongoing because first they might need to access that vocabulary in English before they can even access it in Spanish.
Or even continue to develop that trust.
That as well.
To be able to do that as well.
So all that is a suggestion too, and I know you're going to work on it. It's continue to develop relationships. Shorthanded, and then the DOK in Spanish for students.
Depth of knowledge.
Depth of knowledge.
Is there another word for that?
No, that's the way I know it. I'm not sure what it would be called in Spanish. That's why Google will be my friend today.
We'll see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here when we look at the communication of the learning intentions, how often do you feel that you communicated it to students while you did link it? Like, do you feel that you explicitly stated it? Like, was it posted?
I stated it was posted up there. Okay. It's always posted on the board, and we reviewed it at the beginning of the period after we did our agenda.
So it was communicated, it was visual.
Yeah, and then at the end, verbal. We didn't go back to the learning objective, but at the end we went back to our success criteria. Okay. Because I'm noticing that something I want to do with this semester, which I didn't really do with last semester, honestly. It's like we had the objective and the success criteria, but at the end of the class, we didn't go back to the success criteria. This semester, I'm working on ending class like 10 minutes early, so that we end class like 10 minutes early, so that those 5 minutes we get to clean up and then go back to the success criteria, because I want students that maybe if they're not seeing the point or something, or something that or even if they, I think it can help them feel successful, because it's like, oh yeah, I did this today. Cool, like I got what I needed from here. So I'm doing that now, because I think it's necessary for students to be able to be like, okay, I accomplished something. I didn't just do like this paper, I was able to do this.
Yeah, no, so you jumped to success criteria, so that I put as your developmental suggestion is continue to, at the end of class, return to that. I would agree with that observation, but also to, in your own way, make sure that you're relating it back to the intention, so that they can understand the broader purpose.
Yes, I can do that. And that's something else that that I'm working on this semester is, which I sometimes will do. I will overpack the lesson with like the task, and sometimes kind of like slowing down and just doing something and doing it the rest of the next day or something like that. So we have that time.
Do you have socks?
I don't have socks. Were you able to find shoes, Mija?
Yes, but I need socks because they have dirt.
No, I don't have socks, Mija. I'm sorry.
Like
¿Te da cosa? Did you ask Miss Mendoza for a thing to clean the inside of them too?
No.
Pídele if we can't find socks, at least pídele una toallita para limpiarlos adentro. Por eso, límpialos ahorita, ve con ella, okay? I love that's going to be in the video.
I just said fungus.
Just like, please clean that. No, yeah. I'm sorry, but just wrapping it up. No, I would agree, like you were mentioning that, and I think that'll saying the intention again at the end will fit very neatly. And you already mentioned that you've built in that time this semester. Where do you feel that you are with success criteria?
I think with success criteria, I think I'm able to narrow what the success criteria will be. I think before I was struggling more with the learning objective, because I was trying to struggle separating the learning objective from the success criteria. And I was like, but it sounds like very similar, you know? But I think when I talked with my coordinator at USD about this, I was like, I feel like I'm blending them both. And she's like, well, they are supposed to be connected. I was like, but my success criteria is just more specific. I pick out a specific of how many things or that's doable, and she's like, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
those
observable things, like
okay. Yeah, so I was like, she's like, that's what you're supposed to do. I was like, hey, then I'm fine with success criteria. I think success criteria is definitely something that it's a strength of mine, because I'm able to take, okay, like, this is what we're doing today. You should feel successful if you're able to complete this, like meet this. So I think I'm good with that.
Okay, so I'll put that there, and then I think that the next time that we meet, if you're able to act on those 3 suggestions and that you identified for yourself, and I did as well, that'll definitely take you into the direction of someone who's exceeding proficiency in that arena.
Yes, and I'm excited with once we get the textbooks as well. Or you're having that material, I think it'll be helpful, because then I'll be able to, I'm trying to implement social emotional curriculum into it. So if I'm able to have already some type of curriculum, then adding that to it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, definitely want to do the reflection journals. I think that's going to be a good practice for them.
I think I'll actually put that as one of that's something you're going to do as well, because I agree that if anything, it's only going to help them develop more of that academic language.
Yeah, and I think that will help me. Having something like that's going to help me also with my heritage learners, the ones that, because most of them would be considered heritage learners, but there's a big difference between, and there's books that Subtractive Schooling that talks about this, about immigrants that come from a Spanish-speaking country and went to school there, and you as born immigrants.
Absolutely.
And I do see that gap in my students. So then there's a Jose Beltran or Josmar that are much more advanced in their skills of writing and everything, whereas if we have this type of curriculum, then I'm able to look at additional resources for them to continue to build and be more so that their skills they're being pushed and challenged more.
Absolutely, because
so we have that textbook, and I'm able to find, okay, we're doing this, but supplement it with, let's find something.
Well, I think that mistake is often made, and it's coordinators who develop, or test makers who develop the CELT and now the LPAC, though there's this confusion between, if you're Hispanic, then you must speak Spanish, which doesn't correlate, and the level of Spanish that you and I had as a child very different. Like I was, I know that you lived in Mexico for the first part of your life, whereas I lived here 6 on. We had completely different levels of Spanish.
Yes. So I think I'm excited about getting that textbook and then being able to provide like extra resources for them so that they're, they don't get kind of stuck or kind of cruise by.
I don't know. It allows you to differentiate better without reinventing the wheel.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Ms. Baltasar, for meeting with me. I appreciate it.
Okay, awesome. So I have one more question. When we do like your observations when you come in, are they going to be like the 15 minutes?